I beg you to try it, Patricia.
Let me get this straight, Carla. You disagree on the weapon, you disagree on the number of blows.
Listen to me, Patricia. You dare once in your life.
Hey people, Trish Wood here, and this is Trish Wood is Critical. We have on the show for you today a real treat. His name is Jimmy Dore, and I've wanted to have Jimmy on for a very long time. He's a person who in sort of 2015, 2016, when I was having my political transformation, in other words, from somebody who was quite progressive left to somebody who's not that. I don't know what I am. Well, I say it, libertarian with a soft spot for working people and poor people. So as we say, a Woody Guthrie libertarian. I'm going to trademark that because I think it really encompasses what a bunch of us are feeling now. Jimmy Dore is an amazingly courageous guy. And listen, swear words are going to be said multiple times by Jimmy because that's who he is. So I'm giving you a warning, but we're adults here. If you've got young kids and you don't want them, that's fine. But he's a guy who was also progressive left. He was on a show called The Young Turks, and then it was kind of the 2015-2016 election for him, like for me, the belief in Bernie Sanders, and then the complete betrayal by him and the party, and then the Russia hoax nonsense that set us down different paths. Now, he would probably say, I don't know if he would say this actually, that he's progressive left, but he at least embodies something that it was supposed to mean in 2015, that now who knows what it even means, right? I am more libertarian than I am even left now, just because that's what happened to me. I'm sick of all of them, actually. I'm sick of the uniparty. I'm sick of all of it. I think our political system has failed. I think most of them are crooks. They're dishonest. We're now on the brink of a World War III with nukes. I mean, seriously, people. There are no serious, smart people in government right now. None of them. And I mean, COVID certainly showed that. And now we're seeing another fiasco play out in foreign policy. Obviously, it's the Biden administration that keeps upping the ante here by meddling around in Ukraine. But, you know, our prime minister is following suit. So Jimmy and I have been on a similar road, but he was very bold and doing amazingly prescient podcasts where he was really good at seeing where we were going. He's really good at calling people out. He understood early on who the bullshitters were and called them out. So he's been a real stabilizing influence on me in the sense that there were days when I felt in this process like I was going crazy, and listening to Jimmy made me realize I wasn't. So I'm really glad to have him. And I hope that in some way, maybe I'm that way for you too. I've heard from some of you that I am, that when we hear things said that we believe are true, but are not being repeated or are being contradicted by legacy media with no evidence at all, you know, we can feel isolated and maybe a bit scared. And even, you know, there's some cognitive dissonance around that too. So people like Jimmy Dore and Max Blumenthal at Gray Zone and Glenn Greenwald always knocks it out of the park for me. Tucker Carlson too. There's lots of people who've become touchstones for me. And what's interesting is in that list of people I just gave, they're all over the political spectrum. What binds them is a commitment to truth, right? They see through propaganda and they're gifted in doing so. And Jimmy Dore is one of those people. So we're going to get to him very, very quickly. But I couldn't let this moment pass. I couldn't let this show pass without talking about the Emergencies Act hearings that are happening in Ottawa right now. What a farce. It's unbelievable. And it makes all of us who know the truth feel even more upset that these people who did this terrible thing to the truckers, there was no basis for it anywhere, right? It's like in the last couple of days, we've heard about somebody feeling microaggressions from the truckers, you know, or the horns were too loud. I mean, look, you bring in something like the Emergencies Act, when there is an actual insurrection, right? Where bullets are flying, like with the FLQ crisis, for instance, not for a bunch of people having a nice little civil disobedience in downtown Ottawa, but they did it. And the evidence, because they did it on a lie, and I fully believe they did it on a lie. I know some of the lies they told. They now are trying to justify it at these hearings, and they can't. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. Let's just go through some of the lies that they told about the convoy. And I'm talking about government and police as well. We're telling the same. So one of them was that they were involved in this arson. Did not happen. Police knew from day one the truckers were not involved in the arson. I know that personally because I was told that by a source in the police department. So, right? But it didn't matter. The story was out there. Global News put it out. It was ridiculous on its face because the woman who said that the arsonist told her he was with the trucker convoy, she didn't even, she walked past these guys lighting the building on fire, and she didn't run out and call the police. She went upstairs to her apartment to bed, right? So not credible. And it turns out that obviously that they did charge some people and they weren't truckers, but they knew it from day one. So that was one lie. Weapons being present, also a lie, not true. And then the other one that fueled the snatching of the money by GoFundMe was that they were being fueled somehow with these millions and millions of dollars by what they now call far-right extremists in America. You know, I guess they would say Proud Boys, whatever. And of course, that also has turned out not to be true. So none of the stuff that they said was true about the truckers. What are they left with? Why then, and how will they defend bringing in the Emergencies Act, which is essentially a suspension of civil rights in those particular circumstances, right? So I want to play you a piece of tape. Viva Fry says this would be a bombshell for anyone other than the state propagandists at CBC News, Global News, Toronto Star, et al. Justin Trudeau didn't only invoke the Emergencies Act despite a breakthrough in negotiations with protests, he invoked the act to avoid the settlement. Here is the interview at the hearings that brought out that little bit of information that Viva Fry posted on Twitter.
And I also understand then that the mayor's vision for how this would work out as well, and some of the protesters and truckers, was that all trucks other than the ones on Wellington would be moved out of town, and that the protesters would just shuttle in buses from their camps outside of town on a go forward. We were told that was an option, and we don't know if we have no insight into whether or not the organizers were able to pull that off. Right. And you agree and from your statement that it was the police that prevented the deal from being executed in the end, correct? My opinion is that it is a broader context of circumstances, and that the invocation of the act created a new legal framework around Parliament Hill in that red zone, and that the authorities decided to take a step back and see what was the impact of the invocation of the act. Right, but it's fair to say that Mr. Wilson, in your dealings with him, he never indicated to you that the protesters and truckers ever intended to renege on the deal. That is correct. Thank you. Those are my only questions, and have a good evening, sir. Thank you.
Right, so not reneging on the deal. Why did they go ahead with the Emergencies Act, right? What was the point of it? I mean, it's just brutal. So here's another clip from the hearings. This is a really interesting one, too. Speaking of the GoFundMe campaign, the way they were attacking people's finances with the GoFundMe, and also then later the freezing of bank accounts during the convoy, was, I mean, it was a new low, right? And one of the people who was spearheading that was the mayor of Ottawa, a chap named Jim Watson. So he admitted at the hearing that he met with GoFundMe and pressured them to freeze the convoy fundraiser, which they did, and for which he lauded them. Here's the clip.
And so I was approached at some point in that time frame from the consulting firm that represented GoFundMe in Canada to see if I'd be amenable to having a meeting with senior GoFundMe people to discuss and to let them know that the funds they were collecting were very much harming our city and, in my opinion, engaged in illegal activities. So the meeting was arranged, and we had a number of people on the call. They'd also spoken, I believe, earlier in the day or after my call with, I think it was Chief Bell. So he gave them a more detailed situational report as to what was happening in our city and why we felt that these funds should be frozen and ultimately sent back to the individuals, because those dollars were keeping the convoy going.
And what happened after that meeting?
Well, I can tell you during the meeting, I think they underestimated how big an issue this was, and I told them this was certainly hurting their reputational, or their reputation, because they were funding a group that was very much involved in activities that were harmful to our city and our country. And I can't recall the exact time, but a few days later, I believe, there was a decision by GoFundMe to freeze the funds, and I lauded them for doing that.
Absolute cowards, right? They were doing something that was harmful to our city and our country. What was harmful? This is civil disobedience, right? GoFundMe, let me just remind everybody who's listening, GoFundMe was the platform, or one of the platforms, that Black Lives Matter used. I just Googled GoFundMe Black Lives Matter before the show, and they're still fundraising on the platform. Now, let's just remember correctly, weren't cities on fire because of Black Lives Matter? Didn't people die because of Black Lives Matter? Didn't they take over part of Seattle, the CHOP zone, with armed militia because of Black Lives Matter? And yet, GoFundMe was funding them. And why is that? Because that kind of civil disobedience lines up with the political ideologies of the people at GoFundMe and the politicians who love them, right? They would never, ever, ever in a million years have frozen the bank accounts. They would never in a million years have told GoFundMe to disassociate themselves with these people. It's just, and I, by the way, would love to see his list of the terrible, terrible things the truckers, he alleged, did. What did they do? You know, they made noise. People didn't like that. But it was a remarkably, remarkably well-run and calm protest event. How do I know that? On the day that the Emergencies Act was decreed, this is from one of the government security offices doing an analysis for the Government Operations Center, Centre d'Opération du Gouvernement, right? It says, overall assessment, the majority of the events have been peaceful. Since most government employees are working remotely, the disruption to government activities is so far minor. There is currently no known end time for the demonstration. So their own security people were saying, everything's fine. And yet, he went ahead and did the Emergencies Act. Now, I'm going to tell you what I think happened here. Many of the people who live in Ottawa are of a certain mindset. The mindset is managerial class, elitist, don't like blue-collar people who've been smeared by them as hillbillies, including by the mainstream media here. A very famous columnist called them hillbillies, right? And if you add to that Prime Minister Trudeau's ongoing hate speech campaign against them, that they're racist, misogynistic, they're Nazis, etc., 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 of course, when they finally get to town and set up their protest, the people in the city who hold that mindset are going to be terrified, right? It's like, these are people who need their safe spaces. One of the witnesses actually used the word, I am not exaggerating, microaggressions. They were feeling microaggressions from the trucker convoy. Really? I mean, is this what we're lowering the boom for? It was ridiculous. But Trudeau, who I actually think is pretty dim-witted, but he was quite smart in setting it up that way, because this movement that was growing every minute of the day and gathering more and more and more support from Canadians through all echelons of the culture and society was a real challenge for him and his vaccine mandates, which were indefensible at that point. So he was quite smart to go out there and set the stage. So when they got to town, everybody was terrified of these great big lugs and their trucks. Well, they were surrounded by other people who weren't big lugs, but that was the feeling. They felt they were being microaggressed against because Trudeau had set the stage. Let me give you an example here, and then I'll move on from this. I just couldn't not address the Emergencies Act hearings today. So Catherine McKenney, who I think was a city councillor and now wants to be mayor, she's got pronouns in her bio, did a little Twitter thread that says, when hundreds of trucks rolled into our city and intimidated and harassed community members, I stayed home at first. Now, intimidated and harassed, right? These are always words they use. And they followed up and they say, people are sending me death threats. That's what they always do this, right? And the intimidated and harassed are so loosely defined, right? But when the convoy didn't leave, I knew it was my responsibility to ensure that local residents had someone standing up for them, right? I guess she's running for something. Each day I waded into the convoy and I urged the truckers to leave. I started walks so people could safely get food and medication. And after weeks of honking vandalism and violence, I gave flyers warning they would be named in a class action suit if they didn't leave. Yeah, she's using it to run for mayor. And I will also say that she's admitted saying, in quotes, I didn't personally witness any acts of violence. I was told about them. This is always the way it goes around the convoy and all the other stuff they don't like. I didn't personally see it, but there was a microaggression. That's what they do. So that's kind of what's happening down there in Ottawa. And all Justin Trudeau had to do was go out and have a conversation. I know the leadership of the convoy. They're decent people. They would have loved to have been treated with the respect that they deserved if they could have come to some kind of an arrangement, probably. But he didn't do that. He was too busy smearing them. And of course, the media has also gone on to focus about Pat King, and I'm sure the Emergencies Act hearings will also do that at some point. Wow, some guy is outsized personality here to be hovering over this massive national movement, and the only person that the media and the government want to talk about really is Pat King, who's kind of a loudmouth blowhard, who did not have very much to do with the convoy, as I understand it from people I trust. So that's where we are. On it goes. Do I think this is going to solve anything? No, but I think it may put some people in some embarrassing situations because, I'm assuming they're under oath, because the media won't do it. The media won't ask them hard questions. They're all in on the Trudeau side of these people being Nazis and terrible and everything else. So that's one good thing. There will be a record of these people squirming. So that's good, right? Okay, I'm going to do my pitch and then let's get on to the one and only, the courageous Jimmy Dore from the Jimmy Dore Show. So we're self-funded, which means that we rely on you. We have platforms on Patreon, PayPal, and Substack now as well. Substack is our preferred way because they are the most free speechy of all of them. PayPal and Patreon can both be tricky, but we're slowly moving people over. And we are grateful. It's more than just me here, and we work really hard to bring you the best stuff we can. We spend time doing the research. We absolutely apply our critical thinking skills and hope that what we do here is inspiring you to look at things in a new way. You know, the COVID catastrophe and propaganda was not a one-off, right? I mean, I think it woke a lot of people up, but they do this on almost every story now. So we're happy to be here along with people like Jimmy Dore on his show and Max Blumenthal at the Gray Zone, who's magnificent. And even old Joe Rogan doesn't need a promotion from me, but he's done some good stuff too. So we can't survive against legacy media if you don't support us. And I would be grateful if you would sign up for a revolving donation monthly of, the price of a Starbucks fancy coffee. And I hope you think you're getting your money's worth. We also do, I do respond to emails, info@trishwoodpodcast.com. My website is trishwoodpodcast.com, and you can find the button there to make a contribution to this project. And next week, I am off to the Free Speech and Medicine Conference in Bedeque, Nova Scotia, which I noticed looks just like the town in the show Shetland from BritBox. That it's like a beautiful, like a fishing village. It's lovely. I'm so happy to be going there and spending time with Chris Milburn and Jay Bhattacharya and Martha Fulford and oh wow, just lots and lots of amazingly courageous people. So that's where I'll be, but we do have a show for you next week too. Okay, onward to Jimmy Dore. So as I said at the beginning, he does swear a little bit, but he's mad, and you can't do what he does and what I do, which is swim around in a whole bunch of junk and lose friends over it too, as he has and I have, without being hopping mad sometimes, and he is. So if that sort of thing bugs you, you might want to rethink it, but you'll be giving up a lot of authentic intelligence and analysis from Jimmy, who is one of the best. He's nailed it on everything. He's got every single issue right. I say to him, he's like my spirit animal. I agree with him on virtually everything. So here is my interview with the great Jimmy Dore. Hi, Jimmy. How are you?
I'm doing okay. How about yourself?
I'm doing very well. And I must say I'm doing extra well because I finally get a chance to talk to you. You have been my kind of podcasting spirit animal since about 2015, 2016, as someone who is a former, very, very intense Bernie supporter who was devastated by what he revealed about himself, and then I'm kind of, I think, in your land of, I don't know what I call myself a Woody Guthrie libertarian, right? Because I care about poor people, but I'm also really sick of government. So there weren't, what I'm trying to say to you in a kind of a glib way is that there weren't very many people saying what you were saying and understanding what you were understanding about the moment we were in, especially with the Democrats revealing who they truly are, right?
Well, I appreciate the compliment on that. I thought, it was super apparent. You know what's scary, Trish, is that we've gone, we haven't, but the people who were part of the Bernie coalition, they've gone backwards. They've gone back to before Bernie ran in 2015. They've gone back to just being regular Democrats. It's the weirdest thing. And then they've gone back to now attacking people who are trying to hold the Democrats' feet to the fire. And they're bending themselves in pretzels trying to find a way to say, vote Biden again. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And I say, it bothers me. It's just like with Russiagate on my show. It was obvious that this was a bullshit operation. This was the way they were going to try to neutralize any power Trump had. And there was no evidence. And that's how I could predict that the Mueller report was not going to indict Donald Trump or anybody in his cabinet for collusion, which is the legal term is conspiracy. But they had to say collusion because they've denigrated that term conspiracy so much now, even though people are charged with conspiracy in courts every day. So anyway, I could predict that. So getting back to the larger point is it's just that we're done. There is no left in America. They've gone back to pretending the Democratic Party is left. I thought we all woke up to that with the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2015-16. I thought we all realized that the Democratic Party wasn't left. The Democratic Party actually was a right-wing party. In fact, when AOC ran for Congress her first term, that was part of her campaign, is that the Democratic Party is a center-right party. And she used to lament that we couldn't even get a vote on Medicare for all on the floor of the House. She said, we can't even get a vote. Well, they could get a vote, but they decided not to. So my point is, we've gone back way backwards. So by the election of AOC and people like in quote unquote the squad, it's actually sent people back. It actually, and that's exactly what they want, by the way. So what you do is you take all your progressive energy, all your revolutionary energy, and they funnel it right back into that party. And that's exactly what Bernie Sanders did. And they demand nothing for that kind of support from their supporters. So Bernie Sanders just gave all his support to Joe Biden, and he didn't demand a fucking thing. No, we're going to have a commission, and we're going to have this, and we're going to have a shut the fuck up. And they didn't do goddamn jack shit. And when was the last time you heard Bernie Sanders demand even the public option from Joe Biden? Joe Biden ran on it. They're not doing it. It's never happening. And we would be better off with not having the squad elected as Democrats, because they falsely give people the idea that there is somebody in government fighting for them, and there isn't anyone fighting for them, including the squad, which Forced the Vote revealed. And so then what happened is everybody got angry at Jimmy Dore because I revealed that their hero wasn't real. The mighty Casey struck out and Jimmy Dore was pitching, and they got mad at Jimmy Dore. Just like I say, we're a country of adult children of alcoholics. We don't get mad at the people who are screwing us. We get mad at the people who are pointing out that those people are screwing us. And that's exactly what happened to me. That's exactly what happened to Julian Assange. I'm not saying that we're anywhere near. I'm making the larger point at a big grander scale. That's what happens to real heroes like Edward Snowden, Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning. So here we are back to pre-Bernie era. Pre-Bernie era.
Well, there's so much in what you just said, but for me, one of the things, and maybe you and I are alike in this way, you said, adult children of alcoholics. I am one. I'm also a recovering alcoholic, so I get the analogy really well. When I came out of that, even as a Canadian, because I so believed in a public option in hospitals for you guys, I so believed in Bernie's apparent support for the working man. That's always my bottom line. And then to see it turned absolutely upside down, handed over to Hillary Clinton, who is antithetical to everything I believe, and then telling his supporters to go there. I was standing in my living room in Toronto, Canada, crying while watching the Democratic convention, because I still thought there was going to be a moment.
Yeah.
Remember there was going to be, like, he's going to do it, like he's going to say, and he wouldn't do it. And my husband's like, what is up with you? And I thought, no, like there was a moment, there was a time in America where somebody who was espousing things we believe in seemed like he was going to have a go at it. And the fact that he caved, and the fact that clearly he didn't mean it because he wasn't even fighting during the campaign, was it expressed something about where we are in Western governments that I think I'm not over. I'm still traumatized by it. I will tell you, I am traumatized by it still, because I can't explain it, right? I can't explain it.
Well, it's so funny you talk about traumatized. I think I certainly was. I think it revealed to me I have in Jungian psychology, it's called a father complex. Everybody has a father complex and a mother complex. And it's certainly whatever happened with Bernie, I projected onto him, and it stimulated my father complex because I took it personal. And of course it's not, right? And so I think that actually, but the thing that made me, I think, so vitriolic around Bernie Sanders was, certainly after he voted for the CARES Act. You talk about traumatized. I had a dream the night before last that I finally got to confront Bernie Sanders. And I was overwhelmed with, because I was just talking to somebody in Vermont. Oh, anyway, and I was thinking about doing a show in Bristol and And I was thinking of going to, tracking Bernie down in town. Anyway,
And saying why?
and yeah, and just saying why are you afraid? I know you're afraid of Kyle Kalinske and guys like that, and so I know you're going to be afraid of me. Why? Why are you afraid of us? And why did you pretend? Why did you lead off every speech by saying, "Sounds like you're ready for a revolution," when you didn't mean it for a fucking second? Yeah. That was just a talking point that you got to sucker people in because you didn't mean it. When the time came, you demanded nothing. You looked nothing of a revolution. You were there exactly your worst critics. You proved them right, that you were there to just sheep herd progressive revolutionary energy back into an anti-worker, pro-war party, and they're proving it by all voting for this bullshit proxy war. And I'm just about to drop a video today, which Hillary Clinton talked about, what we did with the Mujahideen, because we wanted to fight the Russians in Afghanistan. We wanted to do a proxy war against Russia. And she said, that was good. We did. It hurt them. She said, that was good. She said, the unintended part was that all those weapons we gave and all those Stinger missiles, and all those radicals we created, and now we left them there. And now they're used against us. Well, that's exactly what we're doing in Ukraine. Yeah. And by the way, the people of Ukraine are now really getting hammered by Russia. And we predicted this. And, if I could predict it at my YouTube show at the beginning of this war, then everybody else knows this too. They're just lying to you when you turn on the television and you want to hear about the war. They're just lying. And because they're paid to, and at some point they start to believe the lie themselves, just like at some point Rachel Maddow really believed in Russiagate. At some point they start to believe it themselves. Like Senator McCarthy probably really did think he had a secret list of communists somewhere, right? They start to believe it. So, anyway, I forgot what so they're doing the exact same thing right now. They're arming Nazis just like we were arming what will become the future ISIS and Al Qaeda. They're now arming Nazis in Ukraine with Stingers and all the same. It's the exact same thing, and it's some kind of proxy war. But it's even worse now because the people of Europe are going to really pay the price for this, and it's going to cause famine. The famine is coming, and it's going to cause migration. And every problem you think you have now is being made worse by this proxy war that NATO, led by the United States, is waging in Ukraine against Russia. And it's just amazing. People still call you. It's like, I've lived through both Iraq wars, and it just was crazy to me that if you said, hey, I don't think there's weapons of mass destruction, they would call you an apologist or yes. Saddam Hussein, all that. You're a traitor. They do it. They're doing it now with Ukraine, a country nobody could give a fuck about, especially Joe Biden. The only reason they care about it is because they can launder fucking military industrial complex money through there. They could have bioweapons labs there. They could use it in a proxy war against Russia. That's the only reason they don't care about the fucking people. Those people don't care about the people of the goddamn United States. You think they really care about the people of Ukraine? But they can sucker you into caring about them because you're a normal person, unlike people who rise to power.
Well, what they did in Ukraine was set the narrative really quickly, and they know how to do it, right? Putin is Hitler, Zelensky is Churchill, and the country of Ukraine needs to be saved at any cost. And what's shocking for me, it shouldn't be, I'm like you, I'm a million years old, right? I've been through all the wars, WMDs. Remember for the first Iraq war, they had the big lie about the incubators, how the Iraqis were unplugging. That was all I worked on the show that broke that story, actually.
Oh, really?
They lie every time. And so with Ukraine, I will admit that I've been so focused on doing COVID heresy kind of science reporting for the last 2 years, which is its own trauma, I'll tell you. I had to go and read people that I trusted about Ukraine. One of them was Stephen Cohen, who was the brilliant guy always saying Russia is a hoax, the Princeton Russia scholar who was brilliant. Yes,
he was a guest on my show.
Love Stephen Cohen, and very sad he's gone.
Yes, very much.
And Mearsheimer, obviously, and all. So it took me about a week to figure out what the hell was going on, right? And for me, it's like, here we go again. The narrative is set. Rah, rah, rah. The Ukraine flags go up in the Twitter accounts, and that's the current thing that everybody's supposed to support, and you cannot have any other kind of discussion around it. exhausting.
So that's what my lament in my stand-up act about it's been the weirdest cultural flip I've ever seen in my life, where you're not like we used to value questioning authority, right, and doing your own thing. That's the whole American vibe, and then all of a sudden, because of COVID. Now you're not allowed to question anything, and if you do, you're helping fascism somehow. It's some weird kind of Trump derangement syndrome. It's like, so either you do as the man on the television tells you without questioning it, and then you're a good person and you're smart. If you don't think for yourself, you're smart. That's what happened during COVID. And if you questioned things that the government was saying, or Big Pharma, or the media funded by Big Pharma was saying about COVID, if you question that, you're a white supremacist and a Trumper. And I'm like, no, I just have questions. I didn't vote for Trump. I just have questions. They go, Jimmy, only dumb people ask questions. I mean, that's how they made it feel. Right? Or people saying, don't do your own research. Please tell me you're not doing your own research. Before COVID, Trish, you know what they used to call that? They used to call that reading.
Yeah, right.
So that's how bad the propaganda got, is that they've now convinced people that reading is somehow a bad thing.
Yeah, it's true. And just getting back to, I want to just swing this back to Bernie for a minute, who I blame for everything. But the reason that I think we're feeling so traumatized now is because, I remember watching the faces of those beautiful, hopeful young people finally thinking they're going to get a piece of American democracy. Do you remember Bernie's rally in New York City? There was like 30,000 people there. They were all young, beautiful kids figuring it out. The betrayal of them, the heartbreak. It was just, so what happens then? You get a bunch of cynical kids kind of left over in a system that doesn't really work, and now they're very, very badly influenced by social media and driven to take these extreme, stupid positions. It's just a disaster. But I think it was, and maybe Bernie doing that was intentional, maybe making people become hopeless about the system so they give in, or they give up, is what that was about, because it certainly didn't make sense, did it?
There's no way Bernie doesn't know all what you just said. There's no way he doesn't know the effect of his cowardice. And that's just what it is. Bernie has the right ideas, but, it takes courage, right? Every great person I've ever admired, and I would read about them, they always ask them what they wish they had more of, and they always say courage. That is the most important thing. Yeah. It's more important than intelligence, for sure. And I think I have a lot more courage than in intelligence, and the reason I think I can have it in this kind of YouTube news space is because I come from comedy, where you're constantly sticking your chin out because you're trying to stand out. You're trying to do something different if you want to stand out, and I always did. And I was always told, don't do political comedy. Everybody told me not to do political comedy, and of course that's the kind of comedy I did, and that's what got me notoriety. And so you got to follow your own thing. You got to have the courage. So I had the experience of doing that, following my own instincts in comedy and sticking my chin out, and sometimes getting it kicked in, but knowing that I can get up and dust myself up. Well, when I get into this news space, I can do that here too, and I think that's why it's so much easier. And I'm not saying I do great journalism. What I'm saying is the people who do journalism do it so horribly in this. Anywhere I shine a light, I can see that they're fucking lying. Yeah. Anything I look at, whether it be war policy, whether it be Russiagate, whether it be the COVID policy, whether it be vaccines, no matter where I shine a light, I see that they're fucking lying in conjunction, in concert. The media is lying with big corporations, with big pharma and the government, and they're lying to you. And it's not hard to see. And so, Bernie, I wish he had courage. He doesn't have any. Bernie doesn't have any courage. Zero. He doesn't have as much courage as a fucking YouTube podcaster. What does that tell you? And that's why he's allowed to have power. He's allowed to have power because he's willing to go along. And and here's the thing, if Bernie would have did what he was supposed to, and this is what people don't realize, if Bernie would have did what he was supposed to and called out the Democratic National Committee for cheating and to tell his people to walk out of that convention and not participate, if he would have did all that stuff, and if he would have then ran again stand and become elected, they would have did to him exactly what they did to Trump. They were already doing it to him, saying that, oh, he won that election in Nevada. Oh, that's because of Russia.
Yes.
They were already doing it to him. They were already doing it to him. And so if he would have became president and he would have pardoned Julian Assange or threatened to, they would be putting FBI in his closet at his house, saying he's still. That's exact. So that people don't realize that. So if you are an outsider, and that's what Bernie didn't want to go through. Bernie didn't want to become Ralph Nader, let alone fucking be persecuted like with a fake Russiagate thing his whole career, his whole presidency, because they would have did it.
Yeah. Do you remember? I don't know if you remember this or not, but when Bernie. Okay, so Hillary, she'd been exposed for cheating. Deborah Wasserman Schultz had been fired. Nobody seemed to care, which was. The media just dropped it.
That's right.
And then, but Bernie was saying, no, I'm not gonna give in yet. And then he had that meeting with Barack Obama, and there was video of him walking in the portico at the White House beside Barack, and Barack is very, charming and handsome and smiling and stuff. And at the end of that meeting, Bernie came out looking like he'd seen a ghost. I don't know if you had the same thing. And the meeting itself was a secret. And that was the day that I believe he decided not to challenge Hillary further in any real sense. And I always wondered what Bernie said to him in that meeting. It's a pivotal meeting, and it's never been reported. And I wonder if, and maybe this is out there, I wonder if they started the Putin thing then, and if they said to Bernie, if you go against Trump and Trump wins because of you, we feel he is being controlled by Putin, and you will be responsible for that. I did wonder, because he said something to him that A, scared him clearly, or looked like it had, and B, that made him review his commitment to keep on going. That's just pie in the sky. I have no evidence for that, but.
Yeah, well, look at all the times Barack Obama comes out of retirement. What is it to do? It's to squelch the worker. It's the end
Yeah.
the NBA protest. The NBA. It's the craziest goddamn thing.
Yeah.
And then they'll snatch pictures of him and put him in the paper around Christmas time because he's brought some gifts to a children's hospital and he's such a great guy.
It's just shocking.
And they'll never show you
know
the pictures of the hospitals he bombed and the kids that he blew up. Because he had a drone program that killed 90% innocent people.
And that information is rejected by the frontal lobes of his supporters.
That is 100% right. That information is rejected. That's why. And then they hate, again, it's like adult children of alcoholics. Then they hate the person who told them that, which is me. When I tell people the truth, about Barack Obama, they don't hate Barack Obama. They love him more and they hate me.
Yeah.
That's why I'm so disliked by Democrats. And anyway, so it's a burden I'm willing to carry.
It's interesting. There's so many places to go from where we are right now, but I do want to say that you mentioned, that people are lacking courage, and I feel that is true. But where I found it in the past 2.5 years was with the COVID heretics like Jay Bhattacharya and Martin Kulldorff and all these, and Marty McCary, all these amazing people who kind of blew up their careers by speaking truth about what was happening. And what's interesting about it, somebody asked me the other day, what do those guys all have in common? And I said, I feel like it's a really deep humanity. They have a very deep humanity about them. They're not people who can lie and play the game around what is expected of them in the scientific community right now. So that's something to hang on to.
Well, I don't know where you're getting your information, but those people are known as fringe scientists.
I know, right?
The leaders in their field, the guys the most published, the people in their field, and the guys at Stanford and Harvard and Yale. Those guys are fringe. People get Nobel Prize. Those guys are fringe, and that's why and that's what people don't know. People don't know that Dr. Fauci and Dr. Collins are criminals. And so is the person who heads the CDC. Why can't I think Walensky? Is that how you say her name? And
Walensky. Yeah.
Whenever she talks, it's like I feel like she's about to try to sell me a used car. Because that's how every bullshit detector that was ever installed in my body goes off at full speed when she's talking.
I know. The vaccines work. They don't work. They prevent transmission. Well, we were too fast on that. Wear a mask. I mean, it's insane.
So I got 5 of my videos taken down by YouTube and given a strike by I was given a warning by YouTube, which is the equivalent of a strike. And I said, what was it for? And they said, it's about your COVID. And I said, what about, this is a year ago.
Yeah.
It's over a year ago. And they said, well, Jimmy, you said that the vaccine doesn't stop transmission, because I was doing a lot of segments to show people that where vaccine uptake was high, it didn't stop outbreaks of the virus. This was a false. It was always false. And I would show the Singapore example, and I would show Denmark. I would show all these different examples of very highly vaccinated. And so that's why that was my ammunition against mandates. No, I lost my train of thought. God damn it! I was right there.
Well, you were talking about YouTube taking you down.
Oh, so I was making the case that vaccines mandates were wrong. I'm based on that. So they took down my 5 videos, and I said, why? And they said, because you said the vaccine doesn't stop transmission. And I said, but it doesn't stop transmission. And they said, but it slows transmission. And I said, yeah, but what I said was factually correct. And they said, you didn't give enough context.
Oh, my God.
And I'm like, so you're not actually fact checking me. My fact was correct, but you're just saying I have to give more context, and that's worthy of a strike. And they said, yeah. And I said, okay. So I left the meeting. I went home. I looked up, what does the FDA say about transmission of the virus and this vaccine? And the FDA, as of that moment, said that we don't know if it stops or prevents transmission. We hope it does. I quickly screenshot that because they could change it at a moment's notice.
And they do. Yeah.
And they do. And I sent it to my liaison, to the people over at YouTube. And I said, hey, what the fuck? And they said, oh, that's not why we took down your videos and gave you the strike. And I'm like, well, why? Well, now what's that's not the real reason? No, the real reason they said was that you said it didn't stop contraction.
What's contraction?
It doesn't stop you from transmitting it, and it doesn't stop you from contracting it.
Yes.
And I said, oh, so you just flipped the exact rationale for taking such a fucking devastating step against my channel. You just completely changed the reason. And they go, that was our mistake. And I go, well, can you then please give me the timestamp on those videos of my offending remarks so I don't repeat them? So because now since it's always in flux, you guys aren't sure. And they said, no, we can't give you that information. Those are internal documents, and that can't be shared with the public. I go, so you're not willing to show me exactly so you're not going to produce the evidence of what I did, why you're giving me no, they're not going to. And why do you think that is? And where do you think this came from? And this is all because they're in collusion with the government. The big pharma owns the regulatory agencies, the CDC, the FDA. They're in collusion with Google and YouTube, and they're the ones giving the orders. So the orders are coming from Pfizer and Moderna, and to shut the fucking Jimmy Dore down and do it by many means necessary. And no, I don't care if you don't have evidence. They'll just do it. And they did it.
And you actually met people. I'm surprised that I was thinking maybe they're not even real, that it's just some 21-year-old stoner hitting a button somewhere, but you actually met people, right?
Yes.
Yeah. In a building somewhere. Where?
That's
in
right.
LA?
Yes, in Los Angeles.
Wow. What did you make of them? What do they look like, these YouTube people?
Nice, good people. Nice people. Yeah. I bet that the people I met with are genuinely kept out of the loop of what's really happening.
Yeah, of course they are.
I remember I had a meeting with people from YouTube over Zoom, and this was during beginning of COVID, and they were assuring. I kept begging them. I just want to get on the good algorithm again. I go, how can I get back on the corporate algorithm? How can I get back on that TYT algorithm? Well, I want to be on the good algorithm. And they kept assuring me there isn't two algorithms, Jimmy. I go, come on. Nobody comes to YouTube to watch MSNBC clips, and now all of a sudden they're getting all these views. And come on, that's why people come. I go, you can't tell. And so, and I never forget. So I would bring it up periodically, right? And I remember one time I bring it up, and I was really extra hard because felt like I was being suppressed extra hard. So I had a little bit of ire in me that day, and I was really going at these two gentlemen from YouTube. And they assured me that there is only one algorithm and blah, blah, blah. And they weren't suppressing us. And that week, the head of YouTube admitted in an interview she did in England that they have two algorithms and that they're proud that how much they've suppressed independent news in favor of trusted news sources, and that they had even a number of how many views they've reduced on us. And then I came to the next meeting with those guys, and I said, hey, I don't know if you saw what your head of your company said. And they just go, yeah, that was unfortunate.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
I don't know. I'm gonna give the people that I'm in contact with at YouTube and Google the benefit of the doubt that these decisions are being made above their head, and they are not privy to this inside information. These are just people who wanted a job in communications or technology and tech, and they ended up in these jobs, and they don't want anything to do with this censorship or politics. They thought they were getting into the video production business or whatever, or tech business. They didn't know they were getting into politics. And everything, that's why all art is political. And so whenever, it's always funny to me when I hear people say, I don't like to talk about politics in my act. Well, that's a political act, isn't it? Because if you had I remember that guy, Andy, I forget his name. He has a show on Bravo. Anyway, when they were making the push for gay marriage, he would go on TV shows and he would say, as everybody knows, I'm not political on my show, but I'm going to talk about gay marriage. Well, isn't that funny? You're the political issue, gay marriage, that's inextricably tied to every other motherfucking political issue. That's the one. So it's just weird how people pretend they're not political. Everybody is political. Everything is so if you want to do a show and say I'm not going to talk about politics, that's a political decision, isn't it?
That's
just like if you had a TV show in 1930s Germany and you were only going to talk about dating. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not going to talk about what's happening. That's a political decision. What you don't talk about is also political. So all art is political. And that's what people can't get. So I just decided to make mine overtly because it's more fun that way for me.
Well, and I think anybody who's thinking clearly can't kind of help it, right? If you're engaged, it's how can you not talk about this hugely odd period of time in which we live, right? I wanted to ask you just a little bit about your own kind of transformation, if that's what actually happened. It's probably not a good word, but you were on a show called The Young Turks, which it still exists and calls itself progressive, right?
Yes.
But they now represent something that I think most thinking people would say is not progressive, in the sense that they kind of blindly follow the Democratic Party. And my question to you is, why do they do it? I mean, they would have been, Cenk, if I'm saying his name correctly, would have been young and idealistic at some point. And now they parrot talking points that kind of make no sense and say terrible things about you. What has happened there?
They sold out for big corporate money. That's exactly what happened. And they are always signaling to another donor, just like a politician, which is why they got... this was why they defend politicians now. So their whole mission of them was to call out just like we talked about with Bernie Sanders. The whole point of it was to show that two parties are beholden to the same people, just like Ralph Nader said in 1999, that the only difference between a Democrat and Republican is how fast their knee hits the floor when a donor enters the room. And so and so that used to be the mission of the Young Turks, and it went away after Bernie Sanders' campaign, when he decided to join Hillary Clinton and not hold the DNC accountable for the cheating that they did. They didn't just cheat Bernie, they cheated us. They cheated a whole movement. When he decided to do absolutely nothing with his movement, and when he decided to go along with Russiagate, a thing that we predicted would be used against him, and it was exactly used against him, when he doesn't have the courage to stand up against any of that stuff. So that's the Young Turks went right along with that, and they became regular Democrats again, and they pretend to hate the Democrats when it serves them, but they're certainly going to shame you if you say don't vote for them. They're always going to tell you to vote for them. And so that's the hypocrisy and the ridiculousness of them. And I don't know why they exist, because there's already MSNBC. And so that's what they do. And they're always pro-war. And the Young Turks even smeared Julian Assange. They did. People are like, why do you think they did that? I go, they did that because a donor made them do it. And you could see Cenk's eyes. He knows he's lying as he smears Julian Assange and saying he can't be trusted because they said Julian Assange as they're killing him. As Julian Assange is being imprisoned for what? For revealing war crimes. Julian Assange isn't in prison for anything he did with the Hillary Clinton campaign or revealing those emails of the Podesta. That's not why he's in prison. He's in prison because he revealed fucking war crimes. That's what the problem with him. And so, and that's what the Young Turks did to him. And that video is still up, by the way. And so that's who they became. And then anybody who they didn't like, they started to say was a Russian. And they did that to Aaron Mate. So Aaron Mate is an award-winning independent journalist who also helped, who I also helped him. Yeah, he didn't help me. I helped him. He debunked Russiagate, right?
Yeah.
And that's how we found each other, because on my show I was debunking Russiagate and the Syria gas attacks, and so Aaron Mate was also doing those two stories. Those are the two stories that the mainstream media was getting wrong the loudest, and so that's where I'm going to focus my attention. That's where Aaron Mate focused his attention. So he went on to win the Izzy Award, the I.F. Stone Independent Journalist Award, for his, as they quoted, his meticulous debunking of Russiagate, right? And he was printed in the Nation magazine by Katrina vanden Heuvel. And that's why he was allowed to win that award, because she had the courage to print his articles, which got her the ire of course, all the shit libs in the world. And of course, he went on to win the award for it. And the Young Turks start slandering him and saying he's paid by Russia and he's paid by Assad to lie about Syria. And so what they're doing is just the Young Turks, instead of debunking CIA talking points and FBI talking points, they became the repeaters of it, and then they became their foot soldiers in the media. They became the attack dogs of anybody who would tell the truth about the Syrian war or about Russiagate, and that's what the Young Turks did. They would just smear us in the worst McCarthy worst kind of smears that you could ever do, and that's what happened, and that's who they are now. And then they even launched the people who used to on the regular show revenge porn on their website, and they would show upskirt photos of celebrities and without underwear on against their will. They would show them on their website for money, and they did segments called Guess the Celebrity Camel Toe. These are the people that did all this stuff, and then they launched a fake hashtag #Me2 against me, and everybody saw it was phony, which is why Glenn Greenwald did a video about it and called them out. They slander anybody who disagrees with them, and then they use phony hashtag #MeToos, just like the goddamn Democratic Party does it, until it doesn't suit them anymore, like with Joe Biden, right? So all of a sudden it was believe all women, except that one and that one and that one, the ones who are accusing Joe Biden. And then it was, well, you got to listen to them, not believe them. So just like they changed the definition of vaccines, they changed the definition of hashtag #MeToo. And so they're all just big balls of shit hypocrites, and that's why a pothead comedian C student like me can come in their lane and fucking rip them up.
Yeah, and you do it. It's amazing to watch you work, and I know that you're pretty tonal, and you F-bomb a fair bit, and you know what, I actually like it. I did at the beginning of my show a couple of years ago, and was told by a few people that they were using my show to teach their kids about critical thinking. So I rethought it. But I love that you do it, because I think it's totally and completely appropriate given who we're dealing with. During the Russia hoax, there was you and Max Blumenthal and Aaron and Glenn Greenwald and Stephen Cohen who kept me sane, right? There was no one else. Everybody else was, I would turn on Rachel Maddow and she would be, it was like she'd gone completely mad. But
it was like a movie. It was like watching a movie. It was like watching a scary movie that you had to stretch your imagination to believe.
But if a country will do that, everybody hates Trump, but I will say this about him: he was never really given a chance to govern, which is quite anti-democratic, right? He won fair and square, whether they like it or not. Putin didn't install him. The Facebook stuff was ridiculous, right? So what did they do? They accused him of this, the Mueller investigation, or impeach, la, 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 la. It's amazing he got anything done at all, actually. And I say shame on them, regardless of Trump's flaws.
100%. You know, the reason why why do you think they hate Trump? What did he do? What did he do legislatively that makes him such a, what he did was he put an ugly face on the establishment's policies and empire. And so they had to get rid of him at any means necessary. And, you know, Trump wants, they won't even give him credit for the vaccine. Trump wants credit for the vaccine, and they keep calling him anti-vaxxer, conspiracy theorist, because they think they can sell more vaccines with Demented Joe when they can. They did it. So it's just a funny, it's, you know, and the other reason why they hate Donald Trump is because he accidentally would tell the truth that you're not supposed to tell. Like when they said, hey, why are you leaving all those troops in Syria? And he says, because we're taking the oil. It's our oil. And you're not supposed to say that. They're like, no, you're supposed to say it's about liberty. No, we're here for the oil. That's our oil, and we're taking it. And so and so you're not supposed to say that, but he did. And so they got to get him out of there. And so that's exactly what January 6th is about. That's what all this is. They can't. I was told, well, you heard, I wasn't told. Somebody said it. Was it Chris Hedges? I forget who said it, but it was Glenn Greenwald, I think, said it, that Donald Trump was about to pardon Edward Snowden and maybe even Julian Assange. And they said, if you do that, when they come to impeach you, Mitch McConnell said that we'll go along with it and then you will never be able to run again. And so that's another way they kept controlling him. And this January 6th is another way. And, you know, that wasn't, by the way, wasn't a coup attempt. Okay, that was a bunch of guys wearing fucking pajama bottoms and buffalo helmets trying to steal a podium without guns is not a coup attempt. All right, that's just a bunch of yahoos who are pissed off. Half of them got pushed into going into the Capitol by the FBI plants in the goddamn crowd, and the other half got let in by the cops who opened the gates. And once they got in there, they didn't even know what they were going to do. Right, so that's that. And so they have to conflate. And if everything Cassidy Hutchinson said about Trump on January 6th is true, how does it change your opinion of Trump in the release? Oh my God, he lunged for the driver's wheel. Oh, I thought I knew him. He threw ketchup on the wall. How can I live in this country? So it's a show trial where they're interviewing. What is a show trial? Well, they're interviewing. They don't interview the Secret Service people who are firsthand there. They're interviewing someone like Cassidy Hutchinson, who overheard from a Secret Service person what happened that day. So that's what a show trial is. And so it should scare everybody that Liz Cheney is now a favorite of the Democrats, because they're doing it right out in the open. They used to pretend there was a difference. You know, did nobody see that video of Chuck Schumer from 2016 saying it doesn't matter if we lose blue collar workers, we're going to pick up 2 and 3 white collar suburbanite Republican voters in the suburbs. That for every blue collar worker we're going to lose, we're going to pick up 2 white collar voters. So we have 2 parties of white collar, and so workers have nowhere to go, which is why 80% of workers live paycheck to paycheck. Half the country can't afford a $400 emergency. 50% of all wage earners earn less than $30,000 a year. That's in the richest country the face of the earth has ever seen. And why is it? Is because your democracy was stolen from you decades ago. It wasn't January 6th, you fucking lemmings. It was stolen from you. Why do you think workers haven't had a wage raise since 1980? This is your government has been taken over 100%. And Bill Clinton and Barack Obama were not the lesser of 2 evils. Bill Clinton did things that George Herbert Walker Bush could not get done. Like what, Jimmy? Like NAFTA. George Herbert Walker Bush tried to get that done, and Bill Clinton could, because he gave cover to the Blue Dog Democrats to take the legs underneath union workers for a generation. And that's what. So this idea you're voting for the lesser of 2 evils is a farce. So when Chomsky tells you that Joe Biden, because of nuclear war, is a safer bet than Donald Trump, Chomsky was 100% wrong. Donald Trump was the safer bet on that, and that's why, because that's all they got. Do you think they would allow Donald Trump to saber rattle with 2 nuclear powers at the same time? Well, the people in the United States wouldn't, but they certainly want him to do at the establishment tippy top. But they knew it would be bad. It would look bad. You can't say he's a maniac and then let him do a nuclear war. So they got to get rid of him, and they got to get Demented Joe in there. And Chomsky was fucking wrong about that, just like he was wrong about vaccine mandates. And I'm very respectful of Chomsky and respectful of his contribution to the left, but he was wrong on 2 huge fucking issues. And I wish he would apologize, because it would go a long way, and it would help repair the rift in the left, and he won't fucking do it.
Well, I agree with you. I was super disappointed in Chomsky on a bunch of stuff, and COVID was a test for me. Russiagate was a test for me, and now, in a sense, Ukraine is, right? Like, I know people who got thinking really critically about COVID. Yeah, the government lies. Yeah, everybody's lying. It's not true. It doesn't do this. There's no, age stratification, et cetera, et cetera. Vaccines weren't tested long enough. Okay, I get it. And they get really good about that. They understand there was actually literally a conspiracy. They were conspiring.
Of course.
But then on Ukraine, they're like, okay, Putin's terrible. Zelensky's a hero. And I'm like, do you think that they don't use the same playbook on every single major issue? Like, of course they do. But now, Jimmy, all of the bad stuff that you and I have lost sleep about in the last 4 or 5 years, right, is coming to fruition. We have a controlled nutcase in the White House fucking around with nuclear weapons, right? And everybody is sleepwalking into this thing. I had some hipster on Twitter say to me, oh, so nuclear war is the new COVID hysteria. And I'm like, oh, dude, yeah, right? Yeah, I mean, and so now we are where they said Trump would take us, only we're with a person who is way crazier than Trump, in my view. And
well, he certainly is demented, so it makes you wonder who is actually making these decisions. It's not him.
But let me ask, this is kind of, I guess, a more broad question, but when I say how do we get here, I really mean it. Like, do Jake Sullivan and Tony Blinken, are they stupid? Are they corrupt? Do they have a suicide wish? Like, I really don't understand how they can say the inflammatory things they can. I mean, just letting Putin not have to have a NATO country on his border. That's what they promised. That's what they should have done, right? And the people in the Donbass wanted to be part of Russia anyway. They're being shelled by Ukraine. Let them have it. This is not an end of the world decision, right? So what are these guys doing? Why are they risking our lives with this foolishness?
What was that document called? Was it The Prospect for a New American Century? And that was that neocon document that described how they're going to take over 7 countries, decapitate them, and turn them. And they did it. And so when you say, what are these wrong with these people? This is how they're made. This is how the gears work in their brain, that might makes right. And we should be the only, to quote Sagar and Jetty, we should be the only standing blue water navy in the world, and all kinds of bullshit like that. These people actually believe this stuff. And that's why they have such an allergic reaction to the religious fundamentalist Muslims, because they're exactly like them. And they're bloodthirsty maniacs, and they think that hey, if we got to go drop some bombs and kill some people to get it done, that's how they're they're just like Kissinger, they're just like Cheney, they're just like Colin Powell. They don't seem to have a problem with any of this stuff. What is Sullivan doing? What is Antony Blinken doing? He's doing what they always do. These people, this is how the gears work. This is the system they came up inside of. And this is just what you do. You flex your might. You flex your American hegemony. We've been doing this forever. I mean, this Confessions of an Economic Hitman. We've been doing this since the beginning of this goddamn country. This isn't anything new. So Antony Blinken is just like Dick Cheney, is just like Henry Kissinger, is just like forever. They're all like this. They're all imperialists. They're all about empire. We have 1,000 bases around the fucking world, and people are still. I have good friends of mine who host TV shows and go, "Oh, that Putin's a thug." I go, really? We have 1,000 bases around the world. We set the Middle East on fire. Barack Obama dropped more bombs than George W. Bush. Do you guys know any of this stuff? It's just so. I think it's so. I'm going to be George Carlin at the end of his life. Started to say, like, I don't really participate anymore. I'm just watcher. I'm just watching the show. And if you're an American, you get a front row seat. So I have a front row seat. I don't really participate. And that's how I'm starting to feel. Because if I ran for president, a lot of people think that you could still solve this electorally. I think we if we're not going to have a real revolution, then we're not going to solve it, which that's sad. But I don't have kids. So it doesn't freaking hurt me that badly. But and I was going to run, if people wanted me to run for president because I'm calling out both parties' corruption because they all work for the same people, right? And that's why we can't have nice things in America like a living wage or healthcare or end those wars and invest the money back here and end homelessness or whatever, right? We can send $100 billion to Ukraine, but we can't spend $20 billion to end homelessness in America, which is how much it would cost. So people want me to run, and I know exactly what would happen as soon as I ran. They would do exactly to me what they started to do to Bernie and did to Trump, and then they would take my channel down, and then I wouldn't make a living, and they would tarnish my name, and I wouldn't be able to get even booked in venues. Like I have venues now that won't book me. And because they think I'm some kind of right-wing, anti-vaxxer, because I told the truth about Russiagate, the Syrian war. I mean, if you go to my Wikipedia page, it's all filled with intelligence guys fucking editing it and calling me a conspiracy theorist, even over the shit I've been proven right about, which is the Syria gas attacks. They still have the CNN business report. They're saying I'm a conspiracy theorist. They still have, or Seth Rich. They'll bring up Seth Rich. I covered Seth Rich. I never pushed it. I never said anything. I never knew anything. All I said was the guy who was the detective hired by the Seth Rich family gave a press conference. I covered it, so immediately they had to attack me. And so they had Dave Weigel in the Washington Post write a hit piece, put my name in it, and so now I was forever stamped, just like Julian Assange is stamped as being this bad. And so that, again, I'm not comparing myself to him. I'm just saying this is the playbook that they use.
And so these stories, Seth Rich is an interesting story. I was obsessed with it for a minute and a half. And the election being stolen or not stolen in America is a big story. I was obsessed with that too. But there are things that you cannot talk about, right? That you can't.
So that was it. They were letting me know, and everyone else, that you're not even allowed to cover this story in a critical way. And I would ask people on the Young Turks. I remember asked Ben Mankiewicz on camera, "Hey Ben, when was the last time you heard of an open journalists weren't allowed to ask questions about? Nobody knows who did this murder. Why am I not allowed to ask questions about it?" And they don't have a fucking answer for that. But the establishment made it clear that you are not allowed. That's exactly what Chomsky told us in Manufacturing Consent. They set the parameters of what you're allowed to talk about. You can have a lively debate inside those parameters, but you can't go outside it. Like you can debate war about how much you should bomb or how soon, but you can't say maybe we shouldn't. You can't. So just like what said, so you're not even allowed to question.
Yeah.
Isn't that the weirdest thing? You're not allowed to ask a question about it. They still don't know who did that murder.
No, I know. And for me, the thing about Seth Rich that was tantalizing was Julian Assange. Remember?
Yes.
He
winked and said that was his source.
He winked. I know. So of course I was, I wonder if he will ever clear that up. But that's right. There are things and you can't talk about mail-in ballots being insecure either in that country. No, they're perfect. We've never had in Canada. If any of your reporters had bothered to ask, we don't do mail-in voting here because it's too insecure. You can only do it under very, very, and most countries under very, very controlled circumstances, right? So the wide open mail-in voting thing down there, no one does that. Right? But you couldn't report that. The fact checkers were calling this one academic in a university in Pennsylvania who claimed to have some expertise on mail-in voting and said, no, it's totally secure. That was there, even though no one uses it, right? I mean,
what about all the academics that said the vaccine stops transmission of the virus? What about all those people? And now they've been outed and stabbed in the back by their own Pfizer executive who admitted in front of the European Parliament that they never, not only did it not stop the transmission of the virus, they never even tested it for that.
And so we live in a world now, Jimmy, where there are no consequences, and they know it, right?
And they know it.
They know it. There's two things going on that have profoundly changed the way we live and increased the risk, especially around nukes. And that is that people in power know that no one's ever going to hold them accountable. They can do whatever they want. And if the media doesn't cover it, it's like a tree in the forest, right? If the media doesn't cover it, no one's hounding them out of office. That's the sort of one of the main failures of democracy right now. And the other thing is that they know that it's not only bad behavior that's excused, but lying. The White House press briefings, I almost cannot watch them with this new chick, Jean-Pierre, her last name is. I mean, she's like reading the answers, and B, the answers are all lies anyway. And like in my day, when I was a reporter, we know politicians spin. Okay, we don't like it, but they do it. But if somebody was out and out lying in any of the press conferences I covered, the media would have said, the scrum would have said, well, wait, this guy's a liar. We don't accept this, and they would have got together and hounded him into telling the truth. And now they just sit there and it's a joke, and Ms. Jean-Pierre is telling whoppers, and it all kind of rolls ahead, right?
Well, you don't feel better about being lied to by a immigrant, lesbian person of color?
Yeah.
Who's a female? I mean, she checks 4 boxes right there.
Yeah, many
right?
boxes, yeah.
So doesn't it feel better to be lied to by her? I like how they pretended that lying started during the Trump administration. Like, oh, look, his press secretaries are liars. And Jen Psaki was such a truth teller. The reporters thanked her for her service.
I know.
That's just because they're all in the same club. That is the club. And where did she go from that White House press briefing room? Jen Psaki went right to a $1 million contract at MSNBC.
Yeah.
Of course they said thank you for your service because they're all fucking pals. They work together. They're colleagues. They're not adversaries.
Yeah. It's like the White House Press Club did it, right? Same.
Of course. And Jake Uger from the TYT, I told him years ago, what are you going to that thing for? You want to be invited to their clubs? You want to be part of it? Yes. The answer is yes.
Yes. The
answer is yes.
So
and he'll never call them out for Julian. And he went along with them smearing Julian Assange. Randy Credico was the guy who stood up at the White House Correspondents' Dinner and made a spectacle about Julian Assange and called them all cowards, and they had the cops carry him out. That was Randy Credico.
I didn't know that.
Yes. Of course it didn't get covered. It happened in a room full of fucking all the press journalists in the country. Of course it didn't get covered.
Wow. I only learned about Randy Credico over the last kind of events, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, that Randy Credico's, he's a radical. He's a bit of a mental case, but that's what you need in that situation.
Yeah.
You need somebody who's willing to do that, right? And that's what journalists used to be. They used to be the people on the fringes, the people who didn't want to have many friends, the mental cases, the people who were obsessed with certain ideas and now it's not that. It's all people from It's all people from Ivy League schools who are looking to be social climbers, and they want to have a career, and most of them want to have it on camera, or if not that, it's social media. I mean, that's why journalism sucks, which is exactly why I could come in and do a better job than they are, no matter what it is. No matter what story it is I want to cover, I'm going to cover it better than anybody. It's Anderson Cooper, Jake Tapper, Ari Melber, Rachel Maddow. Anybody, I'm going to do it better than them.
Yeah. So I'm getting a message from my control room to turn down your mic just a little bit.
Oh, okay. I'll just keep it a little bit farther away. How about that?
Okay, that's fine. So I want to wrap up with you, Jimmy. Well, I don't. I want to keep you on the line for 5 hours, but we can't, obviously. And I want to just kind of steer it back to what we were talking about with the nuclear situation, which I have seen by going through your channel that you're taking seriously. Guys like Colonel McGregor are taking it seriously. Even a former Joint Chiefs guy, I think his name is Mullen, is taking it seriously. What I can't explain is why everybody else is not. So we know that Blinken and the rest of the people are these kind of neocon, war hockey, Hillarists who never saw a regime change where they didn't like. But they and the media who enable them don't seem to understand what is at stake. And I don't understand why they don't get it. Is it a generational thing? Is it just that I think
it is. I think it is because we grew up under the threat of nuclear war. And, I remember what Sting wrote that song in the 80s, if the Russian people love their children too, why do you, let's stop. And so that, and then it ended. And then we became friends with Russia. People forget this, right? We were their best. And then we came and we brought our bullshit form of crony capitalism to their country. And then Putin came along, and I don't know if you remember, but George Bush said he looked into his eyes, he saw his soul, he's a good man.
Yeah.
And we were palsy-walsy. There was the Great Reset, you remember that? And then it all went to shit because the United States economically was a foe of those again, and we want to sell more liquefied natural gas, and they were a good scapegoat for Donald Trump. It was just a million things that came together perfectly to ratchet up this new Cold War. And I think there's a whole generation or two of people who grew up and didn't have this.
I think it's true. I'm writing a Substack piece. I'm just finishing it today that opens with me sitting in a Volvo under the bridge at the Ivor Salmon House in Seattle with John Kenneth Galbraith, who had just been on tour with an anti-nukes presentation by Howard Hyatt of the Harvard School of Public Health, where they go very directly through what happens medically when a bomb goes off, right? It's awful. And the phraseology in the pictures was terrifying. And he said to me, it's a phrase I never forgot, I remember it now, this was like 40 years ago, he said, "You can't make the world safer for yourself by making it more dangerous for your enemy," right? Those guys understood that. And what we see now is just escalation after escalation after escalation. Zelensky is like a bandy little rooster and a wannabe soldier who, he's demanding nuclear strikes. I just don't understand why responsible people aren't spending more time trying to tamp this down. I really don't. I'm troubled by it.
Well, I think responsible people are. I just don't think they get any media coverage. I think that people from even Henry Kissinger is saying that.
Yes.
Right? And Chomsky did admit that there's only one politician that's putting forward a peace agreement, and that would be Donald Trump. So at least he admitted that. But, so no, people aren't getting the media coverage. Anybody, if you have an anti-war message, you don't get media coverage. They'll bring on 3 different people who are all pro-war, and they're going to debate how much bombing we should do, not whether we should bomb at all. That's going to be the conversation. So that's where we are. And this is what corporate media has got you. YouTube used to be the antidote to it. But of course, the same guy who owns CNN owns fucking Google, which owns YouTube. And so there was just a matter of time before they squelched us, and they're doing it. And they got us. We couldn't tell the truth about we can't tell the truth about things. We can't tell the truth about COVID. They try to censor us over Syria. They censor us over Ukraine, and they'll take you down. If you become a problem, they'll take you down. And as I've already showed you, in my firsthand experiences, they don't ever have to present any evidence.
Yeah. Well, I will say that at least there is Rumble. Rumble is there, right?
Yes,
There's
Rumble
people,
is there.
And Substack, there are people fighting the good fight. But, in a way, I'm sad that I lived this long because I was, I was an investigative reporter on a great show, The Fifth Estate. We did a lot of great work, and the same people at the same show, it still exists, are not doing. I covered Tony Fauci back during the AIDS times, and I had limited respect for him then. And was not surprised by what's happened at all this time. It's his MO. It's the way he rolls, right? So to see the complete abdication of media for having any responsibility to hold to account leadership is the end, in my view, of democracy. My line these days is what's wrong with the world is totally the fault of legacy media.
So the Fifth Estate, I think I used a clip from the Fifth Estate on my show often.
You might have. Yeah, it's a big show here.
Well, when the Fifth Estate exposed the lies around the Iraq War, they showed how it was the ambassador's daughter, right?
Daughter, yeah.
So they exposed.
Yeah. That was my show. Yeah. Okay,
well, that was a great show.
Yeah. I didn't do that episode, or I would claim it. It was actually done while I was there. I worked on a different show for that broadcast, but that was done in conjunction with Harper's Magazine, right? The editor of Harper's Magazine, when Harper's used to be an excellent investigative magazine, right?
Yeah. So, then, in 1996, Bill Clinton passed the Telecommunications Act, which it took us from 50 giant media corporations down to 6. And so now every magazine, TV show, every radio show, no matter what it is, it's produced by one of those 6. 90% of them are produced by 6 corporations.
We're screwed.
Yeah.
Last question. I know you're a busy guy and you're on tour, right?
Yeah. I just came back from, we were in Virginia Beach, Richmond, Arlington, and I just did San Jose, California. We're going to next week. We're going to be in West Palm Beach and Miami. So I'll see you then. And then after that, we'll be in Denver, Palm Springs, and then Burbank, California, the Saturday after Thanksgiving. So we're going to be in a lot of different places.
Thank God for comedians, you and Joe Rogan and others. My last question for you, Jimmy, is this. How are you doing? This has been a really unhealthy and toxic time to live and to be heretical on all these big subjects. It's hard on us, right? It's hard on me anyway. How are you doing swimming around in this toxic soup as much as you do?
Well, as Carl Jung says, we live in a world of opposites. And so, COVID and the lockdowns were great in a certain sense for me in certain ways. And it's also, so no matter how great something gets, the exact opposite is going to appear. And so I had both extremes. And right now I'm still dealing with vaccine injury. So it doesn't, it's not, a lot of people have it way worse than me. But it's still, it's taken its toll on my energy level, right? Let's put it that way. So I don't have the energy level I should. And I certainly have certain pains and different things. But again, I don't want to, I've seen people who are really vaccine injured, people who can't walk and things like that. And so I don't want to put myself in their class, but it's certainly, but the thing that it's the emotional toll of having, when you tell the truth about something like the vaccines or the pandemic or Russiagate. I lost a lot of friends over Russiagate. I lost, they if I tell the truth about Hillary Clinton or then the Democrats, that somehow that means I'm de facto helping fascism. That's what they say, right? And I'm just like, no, you're supposed to, my role is to tell the truth about the people who lied to me. Mitch McConnell didn't lie to me. I was never going to vote for that guy, but I did vote for Barack Obama twice, and I did vote for Bernie Sanders. And so those people, and I did help AOC get elected and Cori Bush. And those are the people who I'm going to try to hold accountable to, the people who actually promised me something. And so anyway, I lost a whole bunch of friends over that too. You saw how the left got crazy. I just tried to get a force a vote on Medicare for all, which is something the left had agreed upon for 30 years. And as soon as the time came to do it and somebody stood up and said, hey, why don't you do it? They ended up hating the guy who said we should do it. Again, adult children of alcoholics. So the emotional toll. The emotional toll has been tough. I've had people very close to me be very ugly and vicious to me without any fact because they got COVID wrong, and be very ugly and vicious to me on social media. And that I'm not going to lie and say that feels good. It doesn't feel good. It hurts my feelings a lot. It mostly hurts my feelings to make me doubt my own friendship. I thought I was a good judge of character, and I never thought this. I didn't see it coming. I thought these people who turned on me over COVID, they were some of the biggest cynic skeptics in the world. Yeah. And all it took was for Big Pharma to find their fear point, and they turn into knee-jerk authoritarians willing to shame anybody who questions authority. And that's been the biggest, toughest thing for me, is to see those people just disintegrate and become the thing that we used to fight together against our whole life, and now they're not. And now they've turned on me, and I've maintained the same, I'm still my body, my choice. I'm still question authority. I know Big Pharma and government are evil entities, but for these people, somehow when Big Pharma and government come together, somehow they make beautiful babies, and they've forgotten their instincts of being real comedians and we're supposed to be skeptics and cynical. And it's the hardest thing for me to take. It really is hard for me to go into comedy clubs still to this day and see, I can go into, no matter when I go into a comedy club in Los Angeles, I'm going to see somebody shame somebody for doing their own research or for not wearing a mask or some fucking crazy shit like that, or not getting vaccinated or blaming, scapegoating. I'm going to see it. And honestly, it's emotionally tough for me.
Yeah, no, it is. And what you just described, obviously, I went through the same thing, and many people have come on my show. And Jay Bhattacharya lost friends and was, all of the people. But the other part of it that was pretty upsetting for me was the day that I realized that I no longer had to wonder how good people lined up with authoritarian governments, right? That's right. I'm like, oh, now I understand how the Holocaust happened. And that's a really big overstatement, but I'm not talking about the final solution, but the years leading up to it, right? It was driven by the scientists and the doctors.
That's right.
Right. And
that's right.
So I understand and knowing that, I've lived my whole life always thinking that Rwanda could not happen here, I was actually there at the end after the massacre there. And, which was basically done on just hate speech, the way our prime minister in Canada hate speech is the anti-vaxxed here, the unvaxxed here. But now I feel I am no longer innocent. I'm no longer naive. I understand how good people around me could be caught up in something that would be harmful to me. A woman I had on the show named Ann Bauer, she's a Jewish writer, she's brilliant, said that she lives in Minneapolis, a lot of lefty friends. She was anti-school closures for all the right reasons, and her friends turned against her. And she said, I learned from COVID which friends would hide me in the attic.
Ha!
Right? So, and we did. We're not innocent anymore. We know things could go south here really, really quickly. And they did. They did. Another year of full-on COVID zero, and they'd be locking us up and holding us down to vaccinate us, I feel.
Yeah. You know, we've all been to dinner with the people who are a little too quick to whip out their papers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, Jimmy, thank you so much. I'm really grateful we got to do this. And I am an unabashed fan and have been for many, many years. And, you know, way back in the times, even when the stuff you were saying was really hard and really, really unpopular. I mean, it still is, but less so. Some people are enlightened. And it's a real privilege for me to get to spend some time with you today. So thank you very much for what you do.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to your audience.
So that was the great Jimmy Dore. Finally on my podcast. See, look at how great my life is. I can see somebody out there in the world who I admire and reach out. And if I'm lucky, they say they want to talk to me too. And so that's great. Makes this job worthwhile. Okay, I got a lovely little note. It was kind of a little bit of taking me to the woodshed. Which, you know, is great. Do that, please. It says, Trish, you are loved. Thank you. But you really do need to read this and do some more thinking on the subject. Okay. So I clicked on it. And it's the Corbett Report, The Dark History of the Royals. So I guess I've maybe made some people question my critical thinking abilities because I appear to be and probably am somewhat besotted with the British royal family. And the Queen's death, it hit me really, really hard. And I don't like Harry and Meghan. I think they're ruining it and they're dishonest. And I kind of want Charles and Camilla to do well and all that stuff. But let me explain that to you. I admit it. I am not thinking critically about the royal family. It's like I don't think critically about being Catholic either, right? There are some things that you believe in because you choose to believe in them. And this is a blind spot for me. I couldn't even argue. He goes through all the terrible things the royal family have done. Yeah, I know. But I guess why I felt the need to defend them and the need to really mourn the passing of Queen Elizabeth II was this, that for me they represent something about national cohesion, something about culture, something about feeling that you belong to something bigger than you are. And we saw that around the funeral, didn't we? All of those Brits coming out to say goodbye, standing in line for hours and hours. I don't think they were there because they don't know about some of the things that are in this Corbett report that our wonderful listener was kind enough to send me. I think they do know some of this stuff, most of this stuff, for sure. But there are sometimes in life for people like me, I can't speak for other people, but for people like me, I choose to believe in things because I need to believe in that. And I feel like our history, our culture, our feelings of being part of something bigger than we are. For instance, with me, it was the truckers. That was a game changer for me in my life. I know they're flawed, but it brought me back to feeling that I was part of a country that I understood. I'd spent a year and a half saying, I don't understand this country anymore. I don't want to be here. I'm moving to Florida. That's what I did. And the truckers fixed that for me with all their flaws, right? And the Queen with the kind of beauty and the pageantry and the music. And of course, for me, the religious angle is also big-ish. You know, she's the head of the Church of England. And the lovely choirs and the lone piper and the ceremony and stuff. That stuff just gets to me. And I make no apology for it. I can't explain it. I take it seriously, but not so seriously that it colors my critical thinking or my judgment. I think everybody in life is allowed to have a few things that they're kind of irrational about. I'm not sure I'm irrational, but let's just use that word irrational in this instance. And they just believe it because they want to believe it and they feel happier knowing it's there. I went to school at a time where we had the Queen's photograph in the hallway at school, in the principal's office, which I saw many times. And we sang God Save the Queen. And for me, that's decades, right? And so it's almost like don't let the facts get in the way of a good belief system. I would suggest that probably the monarchy at this point is reasonably harmless and that people spend a few pennies a year out of their tax dollars to support it. And I think they get a lot out of it. Maybe they don't. Maybe they don't. But I did feel a lot for the great Brits who turned up on the street to say goodbye to Queen Elizabeth II. And I can't really explain it, so I'm glad you love me anyway. And thanks for sending stuff like that. I get it. I totally, what is this wrong with this woman? But, you know, I'll tell you a quick story. A really famous war correspondent died in Syria, and she was shot in Syria and died. And she was a brave, brave lady who actually wore a very sexy-looking eye patch over an eye. I believe she also lost in a war zone. Her name was Marie Colvin. And I found out after she died that aside from being this kind of tough gal, which obviously she was, admirable in many ways, she always wore expensive French lingerie under her flak jacket, right? There's no rhyme nor reason for that. It just made her feel good or feminine or still a woman or something while she was in this terribly, terribly kind of extremely masculinized environment. So it's kind of like that. I can't really explain it, but it does something for me, like wearing lingerie did for Marie Colvin under fire. Or maybe that's a ludicrous comparison, but that's what came to mind. Anyway, thanks for sending the dark history of the royals. I did read it, and thanks for the kind words too. And stay critical. We have to stay critical. Maybe not about the royals though. We'll see you.